Okay, we're going to look at how to find the measure of an angle if you have information about the triangle, but you don't have any other information about the angles. So what I'm looking at here is the handout that you can get in the description. And so the question here I'm looking at is number 1. So it asks us to find the measure of the angle, but it doesn't give us any other angles in the triangle. So I'm going to show you how to set it up. I'm going to give you something that you might want to write down in a notebook, and then we'll be able to solve the question. So here I have all 3 sides, and so I don't have any way of knowing what the angle is. The only thing that I could do is use the Pythagorean theorem and see, is it a right triangle? And yes, obviously it is. I could then, try and figure out if the angle was acute, but I already know that, so that information doesn't help us. What I can do is I'm going to set up one of the trig functions, and so remember SOHCAHTOA. I can use any of them here because I have all 3 sides, so I can use the opposite hypotenuse, the adjacent hypotenuse, or the opposite adjacent. I'm going to go ahead and use sine just because it's the first one, and so the sine of this angle would be the opposite, which is 48, and the hypotenuse, which is 80. So the sine of this question mark should be the ratio of 48 over 80. Now you should remember that we actually have a table that has all of these ratios, and so if I wanted to, I could figure out what 48 over 80 is. I could go down my sine chart and look and see what, I could go find it and see which one it is, and then I would be able to match it up with my degree here. But I'm not going to do that because our calculator has all that information already built into it. So the part that you want to remember here is that this ratio, we already know what angle it goes to. It's in a table somewhere. And whether the table is something that you print out or whether it's on your calculator, that's irrelevant. So this 48 over 80, I'm going to get, I'm not even going to need to simplify this yet, but what I am going to do is use some notation that might be new, and this is what you might want to put down into a notebook. What we do in math, in order to get rid of this sign here, because I want to solve for this question mark. So the notation that we use is an inverse. So if you might have done this in algebra, but the inverse is, the notation is with a little -1. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the inverse sign of both sides here. So I'm going to do inverse sign here and inverse sign here. So it's this little sign to the -1. Now on this side it cancels, and you get the question mark is equal to the inverse sign of 48 over 80. Basically, this inverse sign is saying, go look and find what angle matches up with the sign of 48 over 80. That's what it's telling us to do. So it's saying go look in your table, go look in your calculator, whatever it is, go figure out what angle works for this opposite and this adjacent side. Now we have this function on our calculator. If you look here where the sine button is, and you look right above it, there's the blue sign to the -1. And this, when you hit the second button and you hit sine, on your screen you get sine -1, which is the inverse sign here. So since I needed to do 48 over 80, I can do 48 over 80. And I end up with about 37 degrees. It says to round it to the nearest degree, so that's about 37 degrees. Now remember that if you're in the right, you need to be in the right mode. When you hit mode, you need to be in degree mode here. So 37 degrees is what this is. It's approximately what this angle is. So again, what you want to make sure that you understand is that when you have a function like this, sine something equals this, you can use the inverse in order to undo this, and it's essentially telling you to go in the table, go into your calculator, go look up and find the ratio of the right triangle for which 37 degrees, for which 48 over 80 is, and that's going to be 37 degrees. If that was a little confusing to you, I'm going to do number 3, which is right underneath this as well, and show you how that works. So on this one, though, we don't have all 3 sides. So we have 60 here, we have 57 here, and I need to find out what this angle is there. I know it's a little cramped here, but my triangle looks like this. That's my right triangle. So the question mark is this angle up in here. Now, when I look at SOHCAHTOA, move this up so you can see that. So when I look at SOHCAHTOA and I look at this triangle, for this angle right here, I have my opposite side and I have my hypotenuse. So the opposite and the hypotenuse is sine. So again, I'm going to use sine for this second triangle here. When I go to do that, I get sine of that question mark is equal to the opposite side over 60. Okay, so remember, there is an angle for which, in a right triangle, the opposite and the hypotenuse work out to 57 over 60. So I'm going to use the inverse on my calculator to figure out exactly which one that is, so I don't have to go look it up in a table. Now remember, in order to undo this, we use the sine inverse. So the inverse sine of 57 over 60 should equal what that question mark is. And when I go to do it on my calculator, I use sine inverse 57 over 60, and I end up with 72 degrees when you round it. So that means that this angle should equal 72 degrees. Now this works with cosine, it works with tangent. If you look at the second page here, and you look at some of the ones on the back, you can see that they ask you to do it with a tangent. You can do it with a cosine as well. Just to show you quickly here for 13, if you wanted to set this up and solve the angle measure, you would have to use the inverse tan of 1.8040, and that would equal that angle U that it asks us to find. And so if I do that and I want to find out what that is, I can use the inverse tan of 1.8040, and I should get 61 degrees about. So that means U is equal to about 61 degrees. So that's the basics of how you use inverse trig. If you're working on some word problems or something like that, I'll show you those after.